All right, let's get right into it. A fragile military pause is hanging by a thread right now. We are watching a seriously complex, high stakes diplomatic standoff unfold between the United States and Iran. Today, we're going to look strictly at the facts emerging from recent statements and proposals to understand exactly where this conflict stands, and more importantly, what might actually trigger a return to active hostilities. Listen to these words from President Trump, spoken just recently to reporters before boarding Air Force One down in Florida. He's really pulling no punches here about the real possibility of renewed military action. The language he uses, specifically if they misbehave, is highly conditional. From Washington's perspective, it places the burden of the next military escalation squarely on Tehran's shoulders. It's a stark reminder to us all that while the bombs might not be dropping at this exact second, the military option is very much still on the table. So, to break all this down in today's explainer, we're going to look at four key areas: if they misbehave, the proposed deal, the nuclear sticking point, and finally, a fragile military pause. Starting off with Section 1, if they misbehave, the warning.
So, yes, diplomacy is technically in motion, but man, it's moving cautiously. Trump mentioned he has been briefed on the overarching concept of a proposed deal from Iran. But you know how it is in international diplomacy. Concepts just don't cut it. He made it crystal clear he is waiting to see the exact wording of the text before making any definitive commitments. This shows us Washington is maintaining a highly skeptical posture. Until they review that exact wording, the warning of resumed military action remains completely active. And the perceived power dynamic right now? It's heavily skewed. The president maintains the U.S. is doing really well in these dealings. He explicitly claims Tehran is highly motivated to reach an agreement because of the heavy toll they've taken, even using the word decimated to describe Iran's current status. So from the U.S. administration's viewpoint, the economic and military pressure campaign has absolutely worked, forcing Iran to the negotiating table from a position of profound weakness rather than strength.
Which brings us to Section 2, the proposed deal. What is actually on the table right now? Well, an Iranian official actually outlined a pretty massive 14-point proposal. On one hand, Iran is offering significant regional de-escalation by proposing to reopen shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, which is a massive global economic choke point. But in exchange, they are demanding major relief. We're talking ending the U.S. naval blockade, lifting crippling economic sanctions, and releasing frozen Iranian assets globally. It's a comprehensive package aimed at ending general hostilities, but obviously it requires huge concessions from the United States to restore Iran's economic pathways. But here's the catch. It is absolutely crucial to note Tehran's official stance here. While that 14-point plan is on the table, they're signaling a willingness to negotiate while simultaneously placing the responsibility for the very next diplomatic move right back on Washington. They're effectively saying, hey, we are ready to talk, but the U.S. must change its overarching strategy first. It's your classic diplomatic stalemate, where both sides desperately want the other to blink before the heavy lifting of formal treaty negotiations can even begin. Moving on to Section 3, the nuclear sticking point, or the fundamental disagreement. This right here is the absolute core of the entire geopolitical puzzle. You've got Tehran wanting to separate immediate de-escalation, like lifting those sanctions and opening shipping lanes, from their nuclear ambitions. They basically want to push that nuclear discussion to a much later, completely separate stage. Washington, however, draws a hard red line. President Trump explicitly stated he is unsatisfied with this latest proposal precisely because of that delay. For the U.S., preventing an Iranian nuclear weapon isn't a later issue. It's an immediate, non-negotiable priority that literally cannot be kicked down the road. The timeline itself is the ultimate point of friction. And finally, Section 4, a fragile military pause, and the real-world stakes we're dealing with. 4. That is the exact number of weeks since the United States and Israel officially paused their direct coordinated military strikes on Iran. Just 4 weeks of quiet skies, sure, but also 4 weeks of intense, behind-the-scenes pressure. This number is literally a ticking clock, reminding us all just how fresh the active military phase of this conflict really is. Which leads us to probably the most sobering fact in this whole explainer. There is still no formal agreement to end this conflict. None. This means all these complex negotiations over sanctions and nuclear timelines aren't happening in some peaceful vacuum. They're occurring against the backdrop of a highly volatile, active military conflict that is merely sitting on pause. The naval blockades remain, the economic sanctions remain, and the military assets are still firmly in place. So looking at the board as it stands today, we've got this 14-point proposal pushing for economic relief, a U.S. administration demanding immediate nuclear concessions, and a president flat-out warning that misbehavior means a swift return to force. We really have to ask ourselves, can this massive gap between Iran's timeline for talks and Trump's immediate demands actually be bridged before this 4-week pause evaporates completely? Or is this diplomatic window merely the calm before a renewed storm? What do you think will break first? It's a ticking clock, and the whole world is absolutely watching to see what happens next.